And now gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Bill McNaughton. You know, it's interesting when we meet every week, we don't necessarily get to know the background of people with whom we have lunch and share a little bit of time. So Bill gave me this wee bio. Bill has been a fee-paying member of the RCYC for more than 50 years. So he's been around for a while. He was first taken for a ride on a sailboat at the RCYC in September of 1964. And he realized that if he were going to sail his own boat, he would need a crew, but didn't know anyone else at the club to crew with him. So, with the brilliance that only a second-year law student could possess, in 1969, he bought a one-man boat, a Finn. He checked the books at the public library and found a reference to Finn on page 104, I beg your pardon. He quickly turned to page 104 and read, Finn, not a boat for the inexpert. In his first race on the old permanent Olympic course near RCYC, he rounded the first mark he came to. Congratulating himself on still being upright, he set off for the next mark, only to realize that the other boats approaching the mark were coming from a 45-degree angle to him. He had only rounded the center mark of the course. Today, however, with Mark Taylor's helming, he's made it to our podium. So thank you, Mark, for getting him here. And one more thing before I ask him to come up, I learned this morning that Bill started out life as a possible teacher. He went to teachers college and then transferred to law. So please give Bill a warm shout out.
Thank you, and don't get excited with the fact I'm wearing a hat. You do not all get a drink, because left over from Teachers College is the concept of having visuals to keep the students' attention. So the hat is from Ascension Island, and I can assure you, the best thing about Ascension Island is the hat. We'll learn more about it later. And the t-shirt is from Tristan da Cunha, and we'll learn more about Tristan da Cunha later. Anyhow, I was sailing on Seabourn Venture, which it's interesting because having had our bouts with the engineers from Canberra, and I got roped into this when Diane made a comment about whether there were any small cruise ships left sailing, because of course we hear about the 5,000, 6,000 passenger ones. And Silly Billy said, yes, there are, and I'm going on one very shortly. And she said, oh, well, in that case, you can take lots of pictures and you can give us a talk when you get back. So be very careful what you say to Diane.
Not just a pretty face, you know.
Anyhow, Seabourn Venture was the ship that we were on. It was launched in 2012. It's 564 feet long. Canberra that we were hearing about is 820 feet long. So it's a little over half the size. It has 264 passengers as its capacity. Canberra would take 1,500 passengers. And it's a polar class 6 ice ship, which means it can go into first year ice without any difficulties. Because it spends its time in our winter, in the southern summer, doing trips to Antarctica. And then in the winter, our summer, winter down there, it traverses from the Antarctic up to the North Sea and does trips around the Arctic up there. And so this was the first year they had been in Antarctica, and they now have to get the boat up to the Northern Hemisphere. Well, they decided that maybe they'd do a trip, start in Ushuaia, which is where they depart from when they go to Antarctica, and it would go to the Falklands in George Island, and then up the little chain of volcanic islands in the middle of the South Atlantic. The chain of islands comes from the fact that when the supercontinent started to separate out 200 million years ago, that left a weak spot in the crust surface and volcanoes came up. Most of them never made it to the surface of the ocean. They weren't around long enough because the continent kept spreading. The weak point kept having new volcanoes, the new spot for the weak point. Until finally, South America and Africa more or less stabilized. And the volcanoes were around long enough that a number of them actually broke the surface of the ocean. And those are the islands that we're gonna visit today. Oh, my goodness. Ah,
That just means that people online will be able to see it.
I don't know, they may want, I see a whole bunch of hands going up. They want to vote on the movement. And the no hands seem to have the majority at the moment. Okay, just like being home. And, so we started off at Ushuaia, which is Argentina's port on the west side of South America, at the very tip on the Beagle Channel, just with Terra del Fuego was the only land south of there. And we started from there. And if we go to the first slide, you should have a title slide. I don't know how to make title slides. So we don't have a title slide. Next step, have a map. So one of my retirement gifts at one of my firms was a Times Atlas of the World. Great big huge thing. I gleefully flipped to the index to look up St. Helena, which was one of the islands. No entry. The Times only considers land, big masses of land, to be worthy of being in an atlas. So I'm starting with what we were leaving behind. This is our backyard with the bird feeders, enjoying the fact that I put out bird food. And next. Of course, every good trip starts in the bar at the airport. It was a very nice menu. I think that is a Napoleon. No, it's a Hemingway. I think that's a Hemingway that I was enjoying before I took off. And next, please. One of the great things about your kids growing up is that you no longer have to go to every Hard Rock Cafe and every Planet Hollywood and every city you go to. Buenos Aires, like Toronto, the waterfront has changed dramatically with the change in shipping. And it's become like Toronto, it's become an area of restaurants and entertainment. And we did not eat at the Hard Rock Cafe. We ate at a very nice restaurant just across the square from there. I ordered a sirloin because I'm you're in Argentina, you gotta order beef. You certainly aren't gonna order chicken, that's for sure. And I got the biggest piece of meat I have ever seen in my life. It was about the size of a dinner plate. I managed to eat maybe 30–40% of it. The rest of it we sliced up and I took back and we put in the fridge. And of course, it starts with a hotel room in Buenos Aires. So, they didn't skip on a hotel room. If you ever want to know what gold faucets look like in your hotel room, this is what it's like. Next. And you get a beautiful view of downtown Buenos Aires. Next. If your boat is missing one thing in its head, this might be worth an addition. Next. And you fly first to Ushuaia, and we're flying along the Beagle Channel here, just coming into Ushuaia. Next. We have arrived in Ushuaia. As you can see, it's mountainous. That's the city basically in the background. Next. And Diane had asked if there were small ships. Okay, Seabourn Venture is the dark green hulled one in the middle. So that'll give you an idea of the scale of the ships that sail down in the Antarctic. There are no 5,000, 6,000 passenger vessels down there. For voyages to Antarctica, there is a limit on the number of passengers you can have on the entire ship, which is I think around 400 or 600 or something. And there's a limit on how many you can put ashore at any given time. Next. Exciting Ushuaia. You didn't worry about leaving. One of the problems with Ushuaia is that the ships that come and go have to be spot on time because they don't have hotel rooms to put up a shipload of people if the plane's late. And they don't have hotel rooms to put up a plane load of people if the ship is late. So they're very well timed. Next, please. And that's what it's really like leaving. This was the start. Next. Of course, there's a great bartender. The blue drink, I can't remember what it was. It was okay, but the chips were better. So that's the last blue drink I had. Next. And this is how they do the disembarkation. Everybody doesn't get off at once. You're given a color. So for the first disembarkation, you see yellow was first, and then yellow. That's for the first day. For the next day, yellow would be last, and everybody moves up one. So you don't have people getting annoyed because they're always the last people off the boat. Next. And that's what you get off in. That's looking down. The zodiacs are stored on the upper deck and they're dropped down. You can see the line going down to that one. Next. We got very used to watching this as they went past us. Next. And when you land someplace, they're also very good at giving you a chart on the TV in your room, so you know exactly where you're going. And the first place we went to, we were going to West Point Island, which is part of Carcross there, and you can see, get a rough idea, that's West Falkland, just off to the right, etc. I'd love to know what the depth was for Death Cove there in West Falkland, but anyhow, next please. And there we go, first group going ashore. You are given the tape, the orange coat, etc. Your life jacket is in PFDs in your room. And next please. There you are, all set. Betsy's got her toucan, because she could be chilly. You get the coat, you bring down a set of, in our case, I use a set of golf pants. Betsy used a set of pants she wore when we were cross-country skiing, because you can get splashed when you're in the boat. Next, please. And did I tell you we're gonna see penguins? Yes. Between going to Antarctica and this trip, I think we have seen every kind of penguin that exists. These are emperor penguins. This is the first time I've seen emperor penguins. You can see the very young penguins that are all the dark colored bumps there are actually the hatchlings from that year. Next. Sorry, next. More penguins. More penguins and birds. There are lots of birds and lots of penguins. These are gentoo penguins. Another secret trick for you. You look at a picture of a penguin marching along the ice in Antarctica or someplace, you can tell whether it's going to the water or from the water. If it's going to the water, its front is all brown and dirty from sitting on the nest in the rookery. If it's coming back from the water, it's beautiful, pristine white because it's all been washed off. Next, please. Of course, every so often Bill gets artsy because he did a lot of photography when he was at university, and he takes artsy pictures in the middle of the penguin pictures. Next. More footprints, artsy footprints. Very, very fine sand. Yeah. This is one of the nice things about being the Falklands this time around. This is a regular van and it's driving on a more or less regular road. The first time we were there were no roads here. It was all Land Rovers going across country. And so the first time we went across to see some penguins, it took a long time. It took over an hour to get there. This thing will cover it in about 10 minutes, much more comfortably. Next. And of course, there are all sorts of little museums around. And I'm one of these people that I will go someplace and I will spend hours going through maritime museums and little museums. I just love that sort of stuff. This is the Falklands War that we remember was not the first battle of the Falklands. There was a battle in World War I between British and German cruisers. And this is one of the shells from one of the British cruisers, which fired, this is not the shell. The cruiser fired the first shot in the Battle of the Falklands in 1914. Next. And of course, there were also, at the same museum, there were also a note about the last Falklands War. Also, at the age of 19, it really brings home how young most soldiers are and how lucky so many of us are that we never had to go. Next, please. These are the museum also had a thing about the landmarks, and I love the picture at the bottom. That was typical of what happens when you were going across country if you got the angles slightly wrong.
One at the top left.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, well, he's got an issue too.
That's right, it was through a lake. You go, oh, and
Yeah,
then you find there's something underneath.
they were really quite the thing. Next, please. And this is the kind of road you now have, which is, as you can appreciate, if you look at either side, it's much nicer driving on the paved surface. Next. Of course, like all good places on earth, it has a tavern. Next. Which serve Falkland Beer Works, rock hopper beer. Rock hoppers are a type of penguin. It was a good beer. Next. The ship also has 2 submarines on it. They didn't deploy them on this because there's frankly nothing to see. But we got a tour of the submarine pen. It's about $600 US a pop for about 20 minutes or so. So even if there was something they thought we might want to see, I'm not going to spend $600 to see something I see snorkeling on every coral reef I go to. In the Antarctic, they're quite useful and quite spectacular because you get to be underneath the ice and you get to actually see what it's like, the part we never see. Next, please. Now, Ernest Shackleton, we can't accuse him of misleading advertising. He was announcing the Trans-Antarctic Expedition. Next, please.
Return doubtful.
And he was going to go, and how he funded these sort of things was he would give talks. And that was how he raised funds for his expeditions. Next, please. And he also appears in the John Player and Sons cigarette cards. Next, please. He had a photographer with him who is using glass plates. That's the photography in an 8x10 camera. It's using glass plates. And he produced some of the most extraordinary images. Next, please. This was the idea. He'd go from South Georgia to the Wendell Sea, get off, march across, go to the South Pole, end up at McMurdo. That was the theory. Next, please. It didn't work out that way. Honduras got trapped in the ice. It's in the ice for almost a year. It was carried up. Finally, it sank, got crushed in the ice and finally sank. And next, please. with his crew, all of his crew. They went across the ice, they dragged the boat, 2 boats, I think, they dragged the boat with them. Next, please. And this could have been the very last picture anybody ever saw Shackleton in. He is sailing away. The crew on Elephant Island are waving goodbye. And you have to realize, if he misses the island, he misses South Georgia, there's nothing else. Nobody is going to come to look for these people because they aren't supposed to be there. If they never look for them, they look on the other side of Antarctica where they were supposed to have arrived. So this could have been the very last picture. Next, please. He was also very, very clever because there were 2 people on the crew that he had pegged as being disturbers. Maybe that's the best way of phrasing it. Potential disturbers. So he decided to keep from Ascension developing in the group that was left, he'd take them with him. So 2 of his crew made it because they were sons of bitches. Next. And this is what they arrived at. They arrive on the west side of the island. Well, there's nothing on the west side because that's where the wind and the waves come from. All the whaling stations, and there were a number of them on the island, are on the east side of the island. So once they landed, he and another member of the crew had to climb up the ice falls, around the mountains, over that ridge that you see, just they went over at the left of it, to get to the whaling stations on the east side of the island. Next, please. And that's what they found when they got to the top. That was the whaling station they were aiming for. Next. They were just about near to cresting the ridge on a morning, and they thought they were close, and they heard the whistle blow at the whaling station to tell everybody the day was starting. And so they knew at that point, we're going to make it. We're okay. Next. Tickets, reserve tickets for 7 shillings, 6 pence, 5 shillings, 4 pence, and unreserved, there were 3 shillings. Next. That's just a general view when you're looking out. So he had a choice. He could either hit the island, hit an iceberg, or disappear. Next. And of course, there are birds all over the place. There are lots and lots of birds. Next, please. That's at school. And there's this interesting grass growing on the rocks. The ones at the bottom are about 5-6 inches tall. Ones at the top are about 1 foot and change. Next. And there's kelp. Lots of kelp, lots of seaweed. And oh, by the way, there's some penguins also. Next. Interesting thing there, the waterfalls, a lot of the waterfalls, see these beautiful waterfalls coming down. Oh, by the way, there's penguins and a bird, but the waterfalls don't run into the ocean. They disappear into the rocks on the shore. And the water just filters down through the rocks. There's no stream going into the ocean.
So that's fresh water then.
That's fresh water from melting glaciers. Yeah.
Wow.
Next, please. Oh, and there are seals and sea elephants as well. Next. More penguins. Is anybody counting the number of penguins they've seen so far? Next. More icebergs. Next. And here we are coming back to the ship. I guess I'm leaving. This other boat's coming back. The ship. Next. This was the whaling station that Shackleton arrived at, Revitkit, on the east side of the island. Now abandoned, obviously. Next. A couple of whalers. Next, sorry. The abandoned stuff down there, you don't worry about scrap value. You just, it's off the end of the earth. Leave, okay? Next, please. More of the same, next. Seals and seal pups all over the place. And they have, no fear of you whatsoever. You're just something moving around, don't bother them. You can be there all you want, next. That's a harpoon gun from one of the whalers. Next. And this is the whistle that they heard when they were just about to finish crossing the mountains. Next. And I'm in South Georgia, latitude, longitude. Pudgy guy with a coat, wearing my rubber boots. Next, please. And that's a replica of the James Caird. You can imagine going across 400 miles of open ocean in that. Next. And this is Shackleton's grave where the cross is, or sorry, where the stone is. We couldn't see it, go over to see it, because there's a bird colony right beside it. And they're very, very concerned about the transmission of bird flu. So before we actually went ashore, you had to go down and they literally vacuumed every single thing you were going to wear. Your toque, your gloves, whatever it is, because they aren't going to run any risks of something coming ashore. Next, please. They're also very helpful. So they had cards. And they had ones that were a little more on point. Next. Different types of penguins. Next. Whales. Next. There you go. Next, please. More seals. Next. Birds. Next. More birds. Skuas are the big brown ones. Next. More penguins. Surprise. With sea lions on the right. Next. And of course, sometimes the sea lions are just things on the beach for the penguins to walk around. Next. What's your count on penguins so far? Do you want me to hold this slide for a while? Next. We were issued with boots to wear. 41s, those will be my boots. And they're stored in an open face locker with our cabin number. So after you're fitted for your boots, you put them in the right locker space. Next. We also had a penguin party. I went to as the ghost of penguins past. Next. Some people weren't all that active at times. Next. We also had a putting competition on one of the sea days done by the various departments. This is obviously the dining room staff with their hole in the course. Understood.
It's okay.
Next. The engineering staff at their hole. Just steal the chair.
We didn't turn it off.
Maybe you should buy next round.
In that case, I'll take the hat. Next, please. One of the islands, Gough Island, I believe it is. Yes, Gough Island has a weather station.
Mike,
There are 6.
Mike.
Gough Island has a weather station. And there are 6 South Africans who in rotation man that station all year round. And that's it for Gough Island. Next. Another nice big bird, actually gliding this time. Next. And this is Tristan da Cunha. We're going to go in the next slide at Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. Now, one of the astonishing things for us on this trip was our weather. It was absolutely perfect for the entire trip, and the sea was calm. There's a couple on board. This was either their fourth or their fifth attempt to land at Tristan da Cunha. And you can see the landing is very small. And you can imagine if there's any sort of water running, what that's going to be like. Next, please. Very narrow entrance. And you come in and you land at the left in the picture. Next, please. And it is the remotest island. They have a signpost there that tells you how far it is to other things, the nearest bodies of land, etc. Next, please. Tristan da Cunha, of course, like a lot of these places, the weather was so nice. We had beautiful sunrises, beautiful sunsets. Tristan da Cunha has one product, and that one product is lobster. And the langoustine type, not the kind with claws that we're used to. And they usually sell out a year in advance. So we arrived there, and the hotel director and the chef were very clever. They thought this would be a wonderful place to get lobster. And guess what we've got? We've got fresh vegetables, and we've got cooking oil. Guess what changed hands? Next slide, please. And there's the lobsters. We did indeed have a very good meal. Next shot, please. This is all out on deck. You can see our weather is absolutely gorgeous. Next. And of course, we got complimentary booze as you request in your cabin. I found that the Bacardi 8-year-old rum was very fine. So we got that. Next. Now, we arrived at St. Helena. This is 1,500 miles we've just traveled, so we've had a few days. And sure enough, Napoleon's tomb, because Napoleon died on St. Helena and was initially buried there before he was brought back to Paris. Next, please. And there's the tomb. And you can see the vegetation is very lush. This was not a bad place. Hell of a lot better than Elba, I'll tell you, having been to Elba. This would be a lot better place to be. Next. And of course, the perfidious French, of course. Does that mean the round trip is 1 kilometer? Or it's 1 kilometer and then the return? I believe it's the latter. Next. The French government bought the house that Napoleon lived in, and it's now an absolutely marvelous museum about Napoleon. I had actually made it down to Napoleon's tomb and back up, so I'd had the biscuit and wasn't about to walk back and forth through a house, so I didn't go in, but Betsy did, and she said it is a very, very interesting, quite a spectacular museum, and it's part of France. Next. Roads are sometimes a little narrow. Next. Oops, that was not very clear. This is, I've got to get his name right, Jonathan, who is a 191-year-old albatross giant tortoise. So he was hatched in 1853, brought to St. Helena in 1881. And he's there in the grounds. Obviously, they don't want us bothering him, so he's behind the fence. Next, please. They also have their Jacob's Ladder. You're welcome to climb the 699 steps. It has about a 40-degree slope to it. And you could buy a certificate from the museum that says you actually climbed it. Next slide, please. And that's what it looks like. It was originally built as a tramway for hauling supplies from sea level up to the top. Next, please. That's it from the other side. You can see why the soldiers appreciated the tramway. They did not have to carry everything up that hill. Thank you. Next one. And of course, they also serve lots of events on the boat because we got lots of sea days. This was, next slide. This was the caviar in the surf. If you're at an island in the Caribbean, they basically bring an enormous surfboard in. It has a big, huge bowl of caviar, crackers, morning glories on it. And yeah, literally you have caviar in the surf. Here we had to make do with caviar on the deck. It was a hardship, I'll tell you. Next. And we're on our way again. On our way to Ascension Island. Next, please. If you ever think somebody's listening to your cell phone conversation, it's probably someone on Ascension Island. This is an absolutely enormous US and UK listening post. It's one of the stations that keeps the satellites, GPS satellites. It's one of 4 stations in the world that keep them in position. Next. And we had, that's a whale. A beluga whale, I believe. Next. More antennas. Everywhere you look on Ascension Island, you've got antennas. Next. We also had spirited competition. You had to make a boat that was self-propelled and would go the length of the swimming pool. As you can see, this one has a set of rubber bands designed to had a sail, which wasn't much use in the pool. Its main propulsion was a set of rubber bands that were wound up tight around a paddle wheel in the stern. Next. There's another one. People got quite creative with these things. Basically, you know, anything you could find on the boat or anything you could cage out of the crew or anything in the cabin, you could use. Next. And of course, we're about to cross the equator. 0 nautical miles, 0 time. We're there, 5 meters. Next. Of course, there has to be a celebration, guest of honor. Next. And there has to be a ceremony for crossing the equator. So we had Neptune and his queen, and we had the prosecutor. One of the deputies, his crime was phoning room service at 3:40 in the morning just to see if anybody would answer the phone. Next. And in they go for their dip at the equator. Next. And finally, we end up in Praia, in Cape Verde, and a night there, beautiful sunset. And then next, we're back to Toronto again. There we are. Thank you very much, people.
Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Sherry.
Mentioned whaling. Maybe I'm naive. You weren't killing, they weren't killing the whales, were they?
Oh, yes.
Really? Oh.
Whaling was an exceptionally large industry before we had petroleum and before we had natural gas. Gas lights were one of the best gas lights, and the best candles were made from the oil from the head of a sperm whale. And the oil in a head is part of an acoustic system that allows the whale to hear so much in such long distances underwater. The other whales, and also the rest of the sperm whale, the other whales would be melted or boiled down for their blubber. And that was an exceptionally smelly, stinky process. If you were sailing and you saw a ship on the horizon that had a bit of black smoke, you kept away from it, and you certainly went to weather. You didn't go downwind, because they would boil the blubber to get the oil out, then skim the oil off the top. And the blubber, some of the blubber was used further. The rest of the whale and a lot of the blubber that wasn't used was just dumped back in the ocean. But that's what the world ran on, lubricating oil. Best lubricating oils were again this sperm whale oil. It was a very, very big industry. And, you know, when you realize that the whole world was running on whale oil. So it was a very, very large industry.
It's not that way today.
No, definitely not. The only whaling that's done today is there's two types. There is Inuit in both North America and Europe are allowed to hunt whales, but that's again more ceremonial, and also they use the whole whale. They don't throw it away. They use the whole whale, and the Japanese quote for research unquote harvest a limited number of whales each year. And of course, it's purely a coincidence that whale meat is very, very popular in Japan. And so they don't just throw the whale away, they fund their research selling the whale meat.
So I'm glad to hear that. We are trying to protect our whales in the Bay of Fundy. I mean,
I have one note.
Brian,
I was
you want to move up?
I was supposed to say, after the discussion of crossing the equator, of course, when you cross the equator on both sides of the equator, you're in the doldrums. Albatrosses, when they hatch, when they first take flight, they will fly, AKA glide, for the next 3 years until they mature and come back to lay eggs. And during that period of time, the albatross wing is not supported by muscle and tendon. The bone structure is such that they can lock the wings in the gliding position. And the reason there are no albatrosses in the Northern Hemisphere is if you're gliding, you can't get across the doldrums because there's no wind.
fascinating, fascinating. Are there any other questions or comments? Jim?
Who eats the penguins? Are they food for another species?
They're food for seals. Seals like penguins. They're very, very good. Also, when the Antarctic explorers were down there, they ate a lot of penguin because the meat is very, very rich, it has a lot of oils in it, and it's quite healthy for humans to eat.
Fantastic. Any other comments, John? Ron?
So it was interesting to hear about the albatross locking its wings and not crossing the doldrums. Why are there no penguins in the north?
Why? If you can find lots of food and be comfortable in the south, would you ever go to the tropics? It's that simple. I think we've seen, by now I think we've seen all the different types of penguins. And they range from penguins that have burrows in the ground, to penguins like the rockhopper penguins that have the funny tufts on the top of their head. They do not fly, they literally hop from rock to rock to get from the water up. And on the first time when we were in the Falklands, we took this Land Rover for an hour or more across all these bumps to see rockhopper penguins. And there's a little trailer there that's manned by a guy from the conservation people. And there's a big long piece of yellow line just in from the top of the cliff. And the tourists are not supposed to cross the yellow line because that's for penguins only, the rockhoppers only. Of course, you lie down on your side of the yellow line to take a picture, and the penguin doesn't read the sign. The penguin just hops over and stares into your camera. So the screensaver on my computer home is this great shot of a rockhopper penguin staring into the lens.
And it didn't hop right over you?
No, it didn't. Decided I wasn't worth eating, just looked at it.
Decided he wasn't worth eating, so just looked at it.
We have a question from Seamus.
Okay, go ahead, Seamus.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Well, you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, good day, Paul, and good day, Skipper, and good day, crew members. I enjoyed this fascinating presentation, and my compliments on your photography, wonderful images, and also for sharing something I've never seen before. The glass plate images taken by Shackleton or one of his crew. That was absolutely fascinating. And I was delighted to see that the Falklands is not as bleak as I thought. You showed the most important building for community, and that's the local tavern. But did they have draft beer down there, or is it all bottled beer?
They had draft as well.
Yeah.
I wish to report it's very fine, but I decided taking a picture of a draft beer glass, you know, I might as well be here and take a picture of one of the tables. So I didn't take any pictures of the draft beer glass.
Yeah.
Stanley itself is very, very built up. It has, it's quite a large settlement. And the interesting thought right now is that whether if there was another coup in Argentina and the generals decided to take the Malvinas again, because when you're in Ushuaia, you are definitely told they are the Malvinas. They are not.
They're not.
They're Malvinas. The interesting question is whether England could actually physically take them back again. They managed, the first time, they managed to do it largely because in storage mothballs in England, there were 3 Vulcan bombers. The crews that flew them had retired, but they weren't so old they couldn't fly. And they were the only people that knew how to fly them. So the British had the problem. They had to take out the runway in Stanley, because if the Argentinians could use it and put jets on it, they could have cruise missiles, and the entire British line would have to move back 500 miles farther away, so they had time to intercept the cruise missiles. The Vulcan bombers were sent down with about 12 support aircraft to supply fuel. One of them had a cracked windshield, developed a cracked windshield and had to turn back. So the other 2 continued. They continued, so they would be refueled from one of the tanker planes. Tanker plane would refuel other tanker planes. Then it would peel off, land someplace and refuel itself. And they made it, 2 bombers made it down to the Falklands. And one of them managed to drop a stick of bombs that hit the runway. The result was the Argentinians could not fly jets off the runway. So their perimeter, the British perimeter, moved 500 miles west of the Falklands. So they had a clear run at the Falklands when they went to do their invasion.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Jim?
What did they make the beer from? What was the grain? And what was the cost of the cruise, out of curiosity? Thank you.
And I'll add to that, as far as the cost of the cruise, are they still available?
It's 2 interesting questions. I never question what beer is made of. I just drink it and enjoy it. The cruise was about $20,000 US a person. I don't know what they're going to do this year at the end of the season, because our cruise was a repositioning cruise after their first season with this ship in Antarctica. And the ship was only half full. So we had fabulous service. The crew really enjoyed it because they only had half the customers or clients to work with. The cruise itself, as I think I said, cost about 20,000 US. And we're fortunate Betsy's parents lived in the States, so she has American income. and we have an American bank account and an American credit card, dollar credit card. So we don't get dinged with the fees to convert stuff from Canadian.
How many days was it? Sorry, we have a question online.
Yes.
Who's online?
Seamus, go ahead.
Seamus?
Yeah, I just had one last question. I didn't know that until after the Falklands that they never had, proper roads. And looking at the picture now with the road reminded me very much of Scotland. The territory looks so similar to islands off the north coast of Scotland. But are there any other, besides Stanley, are there any other villages or towns connected to Stanley by road?
Yes, there are. I can't tell you the names right now. There's now a very nice road system wherever you want to go in the Falklands, in the island where Stanley is. The other thing I don't think I mentioned that my T-shirt has a couple of dates on it. And it says on it, volcanic era,
61 to 63.
61 to 63. As I said, these are volcanic islands, and Tristan da Cunha became active again. At which point they decided they better get everybody off it. So there were a couple of thousand people. They moved them all back to England, settled them in England. When they decided the volcano had died down, they said, okay, we'll take anybody back that wants to go back. Every single person said, we want to go back.
Well, they must have had a community then, right? Yeah.
How many days for the cruise? And the other, because my image of the Falklands is sheep. Is my image correct?
Yes, yes, you are correct, and it was a 21-day cruise.
$1,000 a day. $1,000 a day. Yes, Craig.
I'm just wondering, did they build all those nice roads on the Falklands for the armed forces to get around?
I think all the soldiers that helped them with their packs from the landing zones on one side of the Falklands over to Stanley, wish they had bought trucks that they could ride in.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Anything else? Well, just a minute. I think I forgot my little token here. I hope I've put one in here, Bill. I might have to give it to you next week. And I do.
Oh dear, I have to give another talk to it.
I apologize. My goodness, I can't imagine that I forgot that, but thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, really, really fascinating, and I love your sense of humor because you find the funny in most everything that you showed us today. So thank you. Let's give him another big round of applause for an excellent presentation.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun to go through all my pictures, and a lot of fun to go through all my pictures. And there is Seabourn has, as part of their website, a ship tracker. Or maybe it just showed up on ours because of our status when it's had all our voyages on. So I could click on this voyage, and it was great to go back through it and get the write-ups on every day and realize how much fun we'd had.
So now you've got all of us wanting to go on that trip. Yes, Jim. Oh, can you
Okay,
send it to me
I'll see if I
and
can find it.
I'll put it in the
Okay, thank you.
I'll put it in the missive next week. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you, and I will bring you a little pin next week.
Okay.
I do apologize. And next week, we've got Melody Schaffer, and she's gonna do a tech talk on Whiskey Jack. And this is just a little description of what she has. 33 lines to the cockpit. Gentlemen, thank you. 33 lines to the cockpit, 750 kilograms of ballast, 10 10-foot draft, 8 sails, 4 spinnakers with 2 different systems, 28 low friction rings. Water system that is fascinating because you have to transfer all the water from one side to the other when you tack. So she's coming back to explain about her 40-foot boat and the complexities of racing double-handed on that kind of boat. And then, of course, the following week, we have moose milk. And I think most of you have signed up for it. If you haven't, please come and join us. It is going to be lots of fun. And then we've got pipes out and we'll have lunch. Bon appetit.